sometimes when you rearrange rooms, you kind of get that whole limbo wire. I hate it when that happens. Maybe that's just me. All right then. So, why don't we start over here? Auburn Captain, would you go ahead and do your introductions and start it here?
Hello, my name is Justin Abel, Captain of Auburn High School Scholastic team. With our table on the screen, Mr. Chapman. My teams are themselves from left to right.
Ashley.
Alex.
Okay, don't forget, nice loud project, please. And over here, please.
Hi, I'm Matthew Coulson, the captain of the Belvidere High School varsity Scholastic Bowl team, coached by Mr. Stuart Hesser-Warner. My fellow teammates shall introduce themselves from my right to my left.
Jack Larson.
Austin Martin.
David Bertoleschi.
All right. Okay. Captain's ready.
Yes.
Hi.
Coach is ready. All right. So, first half, toss-up number 1 begins in 3, 2, and 1. Toss-up 1 is in fine arts. This musician composed and performed the soundtrack for the movie The Winter in Lisbon, and he borrowed the chord structure of Paul Whiteman's Whispering for his song Groovin' High. At a 1953 concert at Toronto's Massey Hall, this man played his tunes Salt Peanuts and A Night in Tunisia alongside... Excuse me? Yes. Your bonuses in science. If the allele frequency is given by the Hardy-Weinberg equation change from generation to generation, it is proof that one of these groups is evolving for 10 points each. Part 1. Give this term for a group of organisms from the same species living in a particular geographic area that are capable of interbreeding. Tasmanian devils are a famously isolated one of these groups.
Population.
Yes. Part 2. When a population experiences logistic growth, it approaches this maximum size that a particular environment can sustainably support. This concept appears as a horizontal asymptote on population versus time graphs.
Carrying passage.
Yes. Part 3. Numbered bands are commonly used in this method that estimates a population's size by trapping a first sample of individuals, releasing them, and later determining how many reappear when a second sample is trapped.
What did you say? What was it?
Answer, please.
No answer.
Oh dear.
Hardy-Weinberg.
No, that would be mark recapture method. Peterson or Lincoln would also been acceptable. 20 points on the bonus. Toss-up number 2 is in social studies. The distributive principles of this concept would be best decided for society using game theory's maximum criteria by people operating from the original position. This concept includes the egalitarian idea that inequalities, when they exist, should benefit the least advantaged members of society. That idea is known as the difference principle and was posed in a 1971 work that decisions need to be made from behind a veil.
Justice.
Yes. Your bonus is in literature. That was Alex. Bonus 2 is in literature. This real author created Claire Quilty, a writer who names his play The Enchanted Hunters, after hotel where he encountered Humbert Humbert, for 10 points each. Part 1. Name this Russian-American author of Ben Sinister and Lolita.
Nabokov.
Correct. Part 2. This Nabokov book is comprised of a 999-line poem of the same name by John Shade, commentary by the equally fictional critic Charles Kinbote.
Hailfire.
Yes. Part 3. One image in the poem Hailfire is a newspaper clipping with the headline Red Sox beat Yanks 5-4 on this two-word phrase. A John Keats sonnet compares Keats's discovery of this two-word phrase, that is, his reading a particular translation of a Greek writer's work, to Stout Cortez discovering the Pacific.
Chapman Palmer.
Yes, 30 points on the bonus. Toss-up number 3 is in literature. A villain in this play smiles disconcertingly at everyone he meets while wearing cross-gartered yellow stockings. That villain, the victim of a prank by the drunkards Andrew A. Cheek and Sir Toby Belch, is the uptight steward Malvolio. In this play, Malvolio's lady, Olivia, falls in love with the messenger boy, Cesario, who is actually a girl in...
12th Night.
Yes. in history. Under this treaty, the principle of cuius regio, eis religio, being Saxony and Hesse recognized Lutheran states within the Holy Roman Empire. For 10 points each, part 1, name this 1555 treaty between Emperor Charles V and the Schmalkaldic League that allowed princes to choose either Catholicism or Lutheranism for their states. This treaty ended religious conflict in Germany until the outbreak of the 30 Years' War.
Westphalia?
No.
Peace of Augsburg.
Yes.
Yeah.
Part 2, the Peace of Augsburg gave official recognition to this religious movement that began with Martin Luther's 95 Theses and 15 Centers. A combinatorial problem about these objects uses their length and width to determine into which pocket a diagonally shot ball will sink.
Billiard.
Yes. Part 3, Bruce County's Field's medal citation credited her work with services named for this 19th century German mathematician. This man's name is also attached to a type of sum that approximates integrals with rectangular areas. Yes, 30 points. On bonus. Toss-up number 5 is in history. Judge John Ralston presided over this case, staging its 7th day of proceedings outside due to intense heat. Ralston initially erred in issuing a sentence in this case before the defendant could speak. Yes. Bonus 5 is miscellaneous for 10 points each. Give the following about films nominated for the 2019 Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature. Part 1, Big Lou is Minding the Gap. Focuses on the relationships of two friends who bond over this action sport. In 2020, a short documentary about learning to do this in a war zone if you are a girl is set among half pipes and ramps.
Skateboarding.
Correct. Part 2, Bill Clinton and NPR's Nina Totenberg were among the people interviewed for a biography of this figure, who titled another film nominated for the Oscar. This one was also the subject of 2018's On the Basis of Sex.
Better Ginsburg.
Correct. Part 3. The award was won by Free Solo, which depicts Alex Honnold's free solo climb of the Yosemite landmark. Honnold holds the speed record for climbing this granite monolith's nose route.
El Capitan.
Correct. 30 points on the bonus.
I had a Rockford.
Toss-up number 6 is in math. One of these devices uses a randomly chosen pivot in determining a proportion to achieve speed. The efficiency of these devices can be measured in space and time complexity, both of which are described in big O notation. One of these devices performs iterative subtracting until one number is a factor of the other and is named for Euclid. These devices, which were named for the 9th century Persian developer of algebra, can be written in pseudocode to translate them into computer programs. For 10 points, give this term for a mathematical procedure to solve a problem. Correct. The bonuses in social studies. A number of shifts and innovations in American Christianity occurred in the 1870s during a period some historians call the Third Great Awakening. For 10 points each, part 1. Following the death of Brigham Young in 1877, this church began a slow transition away from plural marriage, finally banning polygamy in 1890. Much of the stone for this church's Salt Lake Temple was quarried in the 1870s.
Mormon.
Yes. Part 2. This church was founded in 1879 by Mary Baker Eddy on the belief that illness can be cured by prayer alone. This church owns many public reading rooms and a newspaper called The Monitor.
Christian Science.
Correct. Part 3. Also, in 1879, Jehovah's Witnesses began publishing this monthly magazine that is often distributed freely by members who travel door to door.
Morning Star.
No. The Watchtower. Watchtower, 20 points. Upper end of the bonus. Toss-up number 7 is in social studies. This God's sons are addressed in the first lines of the Poetic Edda. This God's sons, Jarl, Troll, and Thrall, became the namesakes of Norse social classes who were the first humans to receive the runes. This God's mead-filled home lies at the very entrance to heaven. This guy can legendarily hear grass grow. Yes. Bonus 7's in literature. When this man and his companion refuse to pay for lodging, he is wrapped in a blanket and tossed in the air. For 10 points each, part 1. Name this wisecracking servant who is promised an insula or island as a reward for joining a misguided knight errant as his squire.
Sancho Panza.
Correct. Part 2. Sancho Panza serves as a squire to this 50-year-old hidalgo who rides the steed Rocinante and picks fights with windmills in a novel by Miguel de Cervantes.
Don Quixote.
Correct. Part 3. In one episode, an old man claiming to be Merlin promises to remove an enchantment if Sancho performs this action more than 3,000 times. In Brave New World, John is filmed doing this activity in a lighthouse in the days before his suicide.
Blogging.
Yes. 30 points on that one. Class of betas in math. The rule of Saras computes this value by copying most of the input on the right side and multiplying along all the diagonals. When the input is in upper triangular form, this value is equal to a product along the main diagonal. The value can be determined by way of cofactor expansion. Yes. Bonus 8 is in science. The English namesake of this peak in the Black Mountains discovered that it was higher than Mount Washington, but he fell to his death in 1857 trying to verify his measurements. For 10 points each, part 1, name this mountain, the highest peak in North America east of the Mississippi River.
No, that's not Whitney.
No.
Mitchell?
Yes. Part 2. Mount Mitchell is the highest peak in this mountain range. In addition to the Black Mountains in North Carolina, this range includes the Presidential Range in New Hampshire.
It has to be the Western North Carolina. Appalachian.
Yes. Part 3. In 1934, an observatory in Mount Washington in the Presidential Range recorded a world record for this quantity. The record was topped by a 1996 cyclone in Australia.
Wind speed.
Yes. 20 points to Auburn, 10 points to Belvidere on the bonus. Toss-up number 9 is in literature. This author told of a figurehead chalked with the inscription, "Follow your leader," that sits below the skeleton of Alexander Aranda. This man's narrator, Amasa Delano, discovers that the former slave Babo is in control of ship captain Benito Sereno.
Nelda.
Yes. Bonus 9 is in fine arts. This composer used kol legno strings to represent clanking bones in his paraphrase on Dies Irae, Totans, for 10 points each. Part 1, name this virtuoso pianist, the composer of the Transcendental Etudes and the Mephisto Waltzes.
Lee.
You said Lee?
Lee.
Yes. Part 2, Franz Liszt combined slow Lasan and fast Friska sections to form most of his 19-piece collection of rhapsodies named for this country, Liszt's home. Other composers from the Central European country include Bela Bartok and Franz Lafave.
Hungry.
Yes. Part 3, Liszt used a poem by Lord Byron as the basis for both the fourth of his Transcendental Etudes and this symphonic poem. This work's title, Cossack, is punished by being strapped naked to a wild horse, which is then set loose across the steppes. Yes. 30 points on the bonus. Toss-up 10 is in fine arts. The James Laura House in Pennsylvania preserves a row of these windows below the front eaves. Henry Matisse copied these features from the mask of Shira Kunu when he painted Madame Matisse. These human features were made most like the original when Cecilia Jimenez altered an Ecce Homo painting into the monkey Christ. These features are made from real lapis lazuli on the mask of Tutankhamun and are especially prominent in the self-portrait with thorn necklace and hummingbird.
Eyebrows?
Yes. Bonus 10 is in history. By ruling that Congress could not deprive individuals of their chattel property without due process, Roger Taney effectively used this case to nullify the Missouri Compromise. For 10 points each, part 1, name this 1857 Supreme Court case in which Chief Justice Taney also stated the slave plaintiff had no standing to sue because blacks were not citizens and had no rights under the Constitution.
George Scott.
Correct. Part Part 2, another much criticized application was his dissent in the prize cases. He wrote that President Lincoln did not have the authority to order the Navy to take this action, as recommended by Winfield Scott.
Take Mexico City.
Take Mexico City? Is your answer? No.
Bombard Fort Sumter.
No. Looking specifically for blockade. Blockade ports. Part 3, in 1861, Taney issued the ruling in this case that held the president could not suspend the right of habeas corpus. Lincoln and his army officers largely ignored this ruling during the Civil War. Yes, 20 points on that notice. Toss-up number 11 is in science. Sine-eye degeneracy makes accurate measurement of the mass of these objects difficult by radial velocity methods. A brightness spike is key to detecting these objects by microlensing, and the TRAPPIST-1 has been intensely studied. Excuse me? Yes. Bonus 11 is in math. For 10 points each, give the following about Taylor series. Part 1. The Taylor series for the function 1 over the quantity 1 minus x is this type of series, in which each term is found by multiplying the previous one by a common ratio. Yes. Part 2, an important consideration of the Taylor series is a set of inputs on which they have this property, called its interval of this property. This term is used generally to indicate a function whose limit exists. Yes. Part 3, Taylor series can be used to compute that e to the I pi power has the simplified value.
-1.
Yes, 30 points on the bonus. Toss-up 12 is in history. In this modern day country, the term Tucson refers to descendants of Chinese men imported to work the sugar plantations in the 1850s. The roaring canals of the Chauvin culture, or Chauvin culture, are found in this country. Yes. Bonus 12 is in science. When fuel became scarce, Nazi Germany converted 500,000 vehicles to run on this gas mixture. For 10 points each. Part 1, name this mixture of hydrogen and carbon monoxide gases that is used to produce diesel by the Fischer-Tropsch process. Historically, coal was turned into this mixture to provide fuel for gas lighting. No.
Petroleum.
Excuse me?
Petroleum.
No, we're looking for syngas, synthetic gas, or wood gas. Part 2, the mobile process formed gasoline by first converting syngas into this simplest alcohol, whose formula is CH3OH. Yes. Part 3, syngas is a poor substitute for gasoline because it yields just 18 kilojoules per gram for this reaction, which produces carbon dioxide and water.
Combustion.
Yes, 20 points on the bonus, and we're happy.
Okay, I have a score of 400 for Auburn and 40 for Belvidere at halftime. Are the coaches in agreement on that? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. We think everything will right. Hopefully. So, and maybe it would be, and anytime you think the voice is so soft, no matter what somebody does. Yeah.
Okay, any substitutions or anything else? No? Okay. Okay, we can take longer, if everybody's ready to go, we can go ahead and continue with the second half. Captain's ready, coach is ready. I'm nice. Alrighty then, second half, with toss-up 13, begins in 3, 2, 1. Toss-up 13 is in math. Carl Jacobi showed that these numbers can be written in exactly 24 ways as a sum of 4 squares. All positive integers that are not trapezoidal numbers are these numbers. A trapezoidal number can be written as a sum of 2 consecutive positive integers. The sum of the first k minus 1 of these numbers is 1 less than the k of them. These numbers have a single 1 followed by only zeros in their binary representations. And these numbers are the sums of the entries on a roll of Pascal's triangle. For 10 points, Alex? No. For 10 points, name these numbers that can be formed from 1 by successive doubling. Aston,
2 to the n.
your answer is 2 to the n? You're correct. That's what we're looking for. Bonus 13s in social studies. The fourth son of the Aztecs ended in one of these events for 10 points each. Part 1, name this type of event. In total, 3 of these events occurred in Greek myth, including ones named for Dardanus and Ogyges.
Flood?
Yes, flood.
Oh.
Part 2, the third flood in Greek myth, which Zeus brought down after Lycaon murdered his own son, is typically named for this man. This man's son, Helen, was born after the flood and is the source of the word Hellenic.
Prometheus.
No, not Prometheus.
No.
Time. Deucalion is generally for there. Part 3, Dardanus survived his own flood by perching on a mountain in Turkey, in an unusual parallel to this biblical patriarch whose flood ended with a boat stuck on Mount Ararat.
Noah.
Noah is correct. 20 points on the bonus to here. Toss at 14 is miscellaneous. In recent years, a top-level player of this game has played as Man of the Man and Dr. Drunkenstein in friendly competitions streamed online. In summer 2020, League of Legends Pro, Boy won the first PogChamps tournament of this game, whose streams featured commentary by Alexandra Botez. Streamer Hikaru Nakamura, chess is correct. Bonuses in history. While castles and fortresses have been frequent targets of attack throughout history, occasional defenders will take refuge in a temple. For 10 points each, part 1. In 1984, Indira Gandhi ordered Operation Blue Star, a siege of this Sikh temple in Amritsar. Parts of this complex were destroyed in the operation and more than 1,000 were killed.
Golden Temple.
Golden Temple is correct. Part 2. In 1520, Pedro de Alvarado massacred many warriors and nobles from the civilization inside their great temple at Tenochtitlan. Survivors from the civilization would retaliate by driving the Spanish out of the city on La Noche Triste.
Aztec.
The Aztecs are correct, part 3. The Temple of Jerusalem was destroyed by Titus in 70 CE, but 2 years earlier it was attacked in an effort to drive out this Jewish faction that sought to purge all Roman influence in Judea. The group included the Sicarii, or dagger men, who assassinated Roman sympathizers.
Brotherhood of Jewish people.
Your answer is Brotherhood of Jewish People?
Yes.
No. No. Zealots is what we're looking for. They're zealots. 20 points on the bonus. Concept number 15 is in literature. Vladimir Nabokov criticized this novel as a straggling play. In this work, Elisha puts a needle in some bread and feeds it to a dog, becoming racked with guilt until Koya reveals that the dog survived. A rapidly rotting corpse in this novel leads to questions over the holiness of Father Zosima. Christ returns to earth, but is quickly imprisoned in this novel's parable of the Grand Inquisition. The brother Karamazov is correct. Bonuses in science. Think of it as Ashley. Bonuses in science. Since 2005, Roger Federer has only played with a custom Wilson tennis racket made with CNPs and SNPs, two products of the science that enhance strength without adding weight. For 10 points each, part 1, name this industrial science that engineers products for molecules on a scale of 10 to the negative 9 meters. Materials used in the science include quantum dots and fullerenes. Yes. Part 2. The origin of nanotechnology is often considered to be this 1959 Richard Feynman lecture, which accurately predicted improvements in electronics and microscopy by way of miniaturization.
No answer.
No, over here.
No answer.
There's plenty of room at the bottom. An invitation to enter a new field of physics. The answer there, part 3. Feynman was proven correct just a year later when Bell Labs built the first MOSFET. One of these semiconductor devices just 100 nanometers thick. Today, more than 10 billion of these devices, each less than 10 nanometers, can fit on a single microchip.
Transistor.
Yes, 20 points. Auburn on that bonus. Toss-up number 16 is in science. Polyketide synthases produce large examples of this type of molecule, such as the antiparasitic drug ivermectin. The prefix sphingo, S-P-H-I-N-G-O. Excuse me?
Lipids.
Yes. Lipids is correct. Your bonus is in fine arts. Richard Hamilton's 1956 work, Just What Is It That Makes Today's Homes So Different, So Appealing, uses this technique to usher in the pop art movement for 10 points each. Part 1, name this art technique in which bits of paper, including photographs and magazine clippings, are assembled and glued to a surface. Picasso pioneered this composition technique with his early work, Still Life with Chair Painting.
Collage.
Collage is correct. Part 2. Though they resemble collages, pop artist Andy Warhol used for this printing technique to create repeating multicolored portraits of Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, and the Mona Lisa.
Silkscreen.
Silkscreen is correct. Part 3. The Swedish-American pop artist made some collages such as Lipsticks in Piccadilly Circus, London, but he's better known for sculptures like Lipstick Ascending on Caterpillar Tracks and Clothespin, the latter of which is 75 feet tall.
Oldenburg?
Oldenburg?
Yes.
You're correct.
He's in
30
Oldenburg.
points on the bonus.
They have it on the section.
Awesome. Number 17 is in social studies. In parts of Nepal, this holiday commemorates the conversion of Ashoka to Buddhism. The card game, Teen Patti, is most often played on this holiday, which begins 20 days after Dussehra. Mahavira achieved moksha on this holiday, and Rama made his triumphant return to Ayodhya.
Holy,
Excuse me?
holy,
No. During this holiday. Colored sand is used to create rangoli designs on the floor during this holiday. On the last day of the celebration, sisters feed their brothers to strengthen the sibling bond, and homes are cleaned on the first day to be inviting to Lakshmi. Diya oil lamps are widely used on, for 10 points, what 5-day Indian festival of lights. Diwali is correct. Bonuses in literature. Jessa Lynn deals with her father's suicide and her love for her brother's girlfriend in Kristen Arnett's Mostly Dead Things, a lesbian taxidermy novel set in this state. For 10 points each. Part 1, name this American state. Also the setting of Carl Hiaasen's Sick Puppy and Karen Russell's Swamplandia.
Florida.
You said Florida? Florida is correct. Part 2, this novelist and anthropologist set her novel about Janie Crawford's life, growth, and 3 marriages. Their eyes were watching God, in her hometown of Eatonville, Florida.
Thurston.
Yes, Kirsten is correct. Part 3, Jody Baxter adopts the title fawn in this Pulitzer Prize-winning novel set in the Florida backwoods. When the fawn's growing appetite threatens the Baxter family's food supply, Jody is forced to shoot it. Excuse me? Where the crawdads sing? No, that's not correct. Nobody here.
No answer.
No answer? The yearling. What was that before the yearling? 20 points on the bonus. Toss-up 18 is in history. A description is acceptable. A controversial theory holds that at least one of these events was inspired by a letter from Bristol merchant John Day. The Torres Memorandum details the second of these events, while the fourth carried special dispatches in case Vasco da Gama was met. La Navidad was destroyed between the first and second of these events. The organizer of these events was named Admiral of the Ocean Sea and made first landfall.
Like Columbus's voyage to the New World.
Yes. Columbus's voyages to the New World is correct. Correct, Justin. Yes. Your bonuses are in math. For 10 points each, give the following about circles in unusual geometries. Part 1. In taxicab geometry, a circle, that is the set of points equidistant from the center, forms this regular quadrilateral, turned 45 degrees to be oriented like a diamond.
Square.
Square is correct. Part 2. This term is used for curves that represent the shortest distance between 2 points. In Euclidean geometry, these curves are line segments, while in the Poincaré disk, they are circular arcs.
Chord.
Excuse me?
Chord.
Quarter?
Chord.
Chord. No, not chord. Belvidere.
No answer.
Geodesics.
Oh.
Part 3. In spherical geometry, the geodesics run along this type of circle, whose radius is equal to the radius of the whole square. Excuse me, of the whole sphere.
Great circle.
Great circle is correct. Yes, 20 points on that bonus. Toss-up number 19 is in literature. Like Margaret Atwood, this author created a woman referred to as Crazy Aunt Lydia, Mrs. Touche. A term for cohabitating women took its name from this man's novel, The Bostonians. After romance with Giovanelli, Roman fever claims the life of one of this author's title characters. A governess attempts. Excuse me? James, Henry James is correct. That was it, actually. Bonus 19 is in history. For more than 25 years, Dmitry Ponikov was the most successful spy the U.S. had in the Soviet Union. For 10 points each, part 1, as a general in Soviet military intelligence, Ponikov supplied invaluable information on Russia's arsenal of these weapons. The Rosenbergs were executed in 1953 for giving Russia details of American weapons of this type, produced by the Manhattan Project.
Nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons, correct. Part 2. Some historians believe Ponikov tried to warn his handlers that the USSR could intercept this type of high-altitude reconnaissance plane. Francis Gary Powers was taking aerial photos of the spy plane when he was shot down over Russia in 1960. U-2 is correct. Part 3. Ponikov was executed by the Soviets in 1988 after he was betrayed by this FBI agent, probably the most damaging mole to ever penetrate U.S. intelligence. This man exposed some 50 American operatives before his arrest in 2001.
No answer.
No answer. Belvidere. No answer? Robert Hansen. Hansen. 20 points on that one. Toss-up number 20 is in history. Due to a scarcity of these businesses in the antebellum South, planters relied on factors instead. After 1865, most of these businesses stopped issuing scrip. Wildcat examples of these institutions did not have specie to back their notes. Yes, bank is correct. Your bonus is in fine arts. While this 1902 sculpture may depict the story of Psyche and Cupid, many believe that it illustrates the love triangle between the artist, her mentor, and her mentor's wife, Rose Bouret, for 10 points each. Part 1. Name this Camille Claudel sculpture of a naked girl, possibly Claudel herself, pleading with a man being led away by an older woman. The sculpture's most common English title suggests the man is entering a new phase of life. Excuse me? The shock. Nice and loudly. Shockman Town. No.
No answer.
No answer. We're looking for the mature age. Part 2. Claudel's teacher and lover was this artist whose sculptures, The Kiss and The Thinker, were originally part of his The Gates of Hell. Rodin is correct. Part 3. Soon after ending his relationship with Claudel, Rodin completed this sculpture that depicts a scene from the 100 Years' War. The sculpture depicts a group of civic leaders with nooses around their necks, surrendering to the English so their city may be spared. Burgers of Calais is correct. 20 points.
Time out, 60 seconds.
60 seconds. Toss up 21 and time out.
How are you doing? Good?
Okay, you guys are all out.
Almost done.
So I want the other 5 of you in and Gail, you can chapter, okay?
What did I say about it? But I was later, but what did I say?
Can I ask something I actually wanted to cover?
Which question was
There
it?
was one of the process where it's like 2 weeks, what do they actually?
Powers it through, probably.
It was what, that was, yeah, it was phrased a little more part than that, but yes.
Powers it through. Probably.
Powers of something is the underlying part, so. And they come up and they said something.
But because, like,
Hey,
Tim is a hero is one.
is up
Right,
here.
I know what it
All right.
was, but I didn't know what.
New players.
Number.
New players, let's go ahead and do buzzer check, please. What's your name, Jay?
Jay.
All right.
Yeah.
Can you turn your name tag a little bit forward? Kobe, there we go. Okay. Don't forget. Good job. All right. Coaches ready? Captains? Yes? Captains? All right. Toss at 21. 3 and 2 and 1. Toss at 21 is in social studies. This is the easternmost of the 2 large bodies of water that are connected by a canal through the Nanotechnology Depression. East of this body of water is the Gorabo-Kazal Basin, a shallow lagoon that completely evaporated between 1984 and 1992, which is over 10 times as salty as this body. The Absheron Peninsula, which justs into this body of water, is home to a national capital 100 feet below sea level. The city of Astrakhan lies on the Volga River near this body of water. Baku, Azerbaijan, is on the shores of Kurtan. The Caspian Sea, thank you. Correct, Matthew. Your bonus is in math, for 10 points each. Give the following about measuring angles between things. Part 1. The angle between a line and the x-axis can be found by computing this trigonometric function of the line's slope. This trigonometric function outputs all values from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2 as the input stretches from negative infinity to infinity.
Tangent.
No.
That's time.
Looking for arc tangent or inverse tangent specifically underlined. Part 2. The angle between 2 general lines can be found using the tangent subtraction formula, which states that if tangent A equals x and tangent B equals y, then the tangent of the angle A minus B is this expression in terms of x and y.
No answer.
Auburn,
X divided by y?
is your answer?
Yes.
No. Answer is x minus y all over the quantity 1 plus x times y. Part 3. The angle between 2 vectors can be found using this product, sometimes called the scalar product. This product for 2 vectors equals the product of their magnitudes times the cosine of the angle between them.
Dot product.
Yes. 10 points on that bonus. Belvidere. Toss-up 22s in science. This model often invokes the term antiprismatic with steric numbers greater than 7. The inert pair effects limits the usefulness of this model on transition metal complexes, and this theory incorrectly asserts that group 2 metal halides have 180-degree bond angles. A single lone pair, Vesper is correct. Correct, Jay. The bonus is literature. After marrying a woman 17 years his junior, this man and new wife moved into Hartfield so as to live with her hypochondriac father, Mr. Woodhouse, for 10 points each. Part 1, name us the owner of Donwell Abbey, a sharp-tongued but compassionate gentleman who is briefly a romantic rival of Frank Churchill.
Answer, please. That's time.
Mr. Darcy.
George Knightley. We're looking for there. Part 2, Mr. Knightley's friend, neighbor, and eventual wife is this would-be matchmaker, the nosy, intelligent, and high-spirited title character of a Jane Austen novel.
Emma.
Yes, Emma. Part 3. Emma convinces this friend of hers to reject Mr. Martin's proposal out of a misguided belief that Mr. Martin's lower social class is more important than this girl's feelings for him. Later in the book, Mr. Martin proposes a second time, and this woman, with Emma's full approval, accepts.
Sarah.
Sarah? No, not Sarah.
Elizabeth.
No, not Elizabeth. Harriet. Harriet Smith is what we're looking for there. 10 points on that bonus. Toss-up, number 23, is in fine arts. A molto vivace piece by this composer begins by spinning up and down between G natural and C for 7 measures before a run up to high D flat. Arthur Rubinstein was a skilled interpreter of this composer, who used quick minor seconds to simulate the long notes that title one piece. Because he worried it was too similar to Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, this composer forbade the publication of his Fantasy Impromptu. This pianist, for 10 points, named this romantic composer of the Black Key and revolutionary etudes, who adapted the musical forms of his home country into dozens of
Chopin.
mazurkas and polonaises. Correct. Matthew. Your bonuses in social studies. In January 1975, Nelson Rockefeller opted to ignore advice from this figure regarding a series of motions regarding closure. Through February 2021, that was the last time this figure was overruled. For 10 points each, Part 1, name this position held since 2012 by Elizabeth McDonnell, which advises the presiding officer of the Senate of Procedures. The holder of this unelected position serves at the pleasure of the majority leader.
Senate parliamentarian.
Yes, parliamentarian. Part 2, the Senate parliamentarian's role in the reconciliation process was highlighted in February 2020 when McDonnell ruled that a provision enacting this specific policy could not be included in a COVID relief package.
Changing the minimum wage.
Yes. Part 3, in 2001, this Republican majority leader from Mississippi dismissed parliamentarian Robert Dove due to Dove's Democratic-friendly rulings. This man resigned as party leader after praising Strom Thurmond's racist 1948 presidential campaign, and he resigned from the Senate in 2007 to start a lobbying firm.
No answer.
No answer. Hubbard.
Johnson.
Johnson, no. Trent Watt. Trent Watt is who we're looking for there, 20 points in that one. And then toss-up 24 is in math. This shape is formed by the intersection of the angle trisectors according to Morley's theorem. In contrast to related shapes, the shape does not have an Euler line because the points that would define it coincide. This shape can be constructed from a line segment by drawing congruent circles centered at the endpoints and connecting the dots. In these shapes, the orthocenter, circumcenter, and centroid are all at
Triangles,
prompt.
right triangles.
No. The geometric shapes have area, the square root of 3 over 4 times the side length squared. For 10 points, name this polygon with 3 60-degree angles. Ashton. Yes, is specifically what we're looking for there. And your bonuses in science. Barchan's crescent-shaped example of this feature, more than 3 kilometers wide, can be observed in China's Taklamakan region, for 10 points each. Part 1, name these hills of sand that accumulate on beaches in the deserts, like the Sahara.
Dunes.
Dunes is correct. Part 2, the more vertical slip face of a dune cannot exceed about 35 degrees for this measurement. The maximum steepness after which sand particles start sliding downhill.
Friction limit.
No.
Grade.
No. No, we're looking for the angle of repose there. And then part 3, because dunes are the result of wind action, they can be labeled as this type of deposit. This adjective also describes the wind formed Les Hills of Iowa?
Erosion.
No.
Sediment.
No, looking for Aeolian.
Oh.
On that one, 10 points. And a bonus. And we're done.
Okay, I have a final score of 640 for Auburn, 140 for Belvidere. Do coaches agree?
Yeah.
Okay, and then I need to put the vote to the portion.
Okay. Wait,
Yeah,
five
need your
folks.
name tag back. Oh, that was it.
I'm so sorry, I'm just.
I was thinking that.
I don't know.
Okay, I was thinking that halfway through that, do not trust myself. I do not trust myself.
I had problems with the
Okay, so this is your name tag.
Also, there's no vaccine clinic today. I don't know why you can't get in.
Yeah, we're gonna miss the last one.
Yeah, because that's where the
Yeah, they got it.
Because there should have been a unlocked door because they're supposed to go in. I don't know.
I realized that my work keys and my office keys at